To Julian Vane, the hotel's new 34-year-old CEO, Arthur Sterling wasn't a human being. He was just a cost-cutting opportunity that needed to be deleted from the payroll. Julian kicked Arthur's cleaning bucket over, watching the soapy water soak into the old man's boots, and sneered, "Know your place, old man. You're just the dirt I forgot to sweep out." Little did Julian know, the man he was insulting was the only reason his family's empire hadn't already crumbled to the ground. The Gilded Palms was a 40-story monument to wealth in the heart of the city. Every inch of its marble floors, every crystal in its massive chandeliers, and every brass railing had to be perfect. For 12 years, Arthur Sterling, now 62, was the man who ensured that perfection. To the guests, he was a shadow, the man who replaced the towels, buffed the elevators at 3 a.m., and vanished before the first billionaire woke up for breakfast. Arthur was a widower who lived a quiet life in a small apartment. He didn't need the money. His children, Marcus and Lily, had become incredibly successful in their own right, but Arthur stayed because of a promise he made to his late wife, Martha. He believed that hard work was what kept a man's soul honest. He loved the hotel, not for its gold, but for the discipline it required. However, the hotel had changed. When the old owner passed away, his son Julian Vane took over. Julian was a man who knew the price of everything, but the value of nothing. He viewed the long-term staff as dead weight and legacy costs. The tension had been building for weeks, but it reached a breaking point on a Tuesday morning. The lobby was filled with international investors. Arthur was working diligently on a smudge near the main fountain when Julian approached, flanked by his yes-man assistants. "Sterling, look at this!" Julian shouted, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. He pointed at Arthur's cleaning cart, which was tucked neatly into a corner. "This cart is an eyesore. It's old, it's dented, and it's ruinous to the aesthetic of my lobby, just like you." Arthur stood up, his back cracking slightly. "It's the same cart I've used for a decade, Mr. Vane. It works perfectly, and it's out of the guests' way." Julian stepped closer, the scent of his expensive cologne clashing with the lemon-scented floor wax. "That's the problem, Arthur. You think it works is enough. I'm looking for elite. I'm looking for flawless. And every time I look at your payroll file, I see a man who's been here way too long, earning way too much for a job a teenager could do for minimum wage." That was when Julian did the unthinkable. He took his $500 leather briefcase and intentionally slammed it into Arthur's bucket, sending the gray, dirty water splashing all over Arthur's uniform. "Consider this your final warning. No, actually, let's make it simpler," Julian said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "You're fired. I'm cutting you from the budget today. Pack your rags and get out. And don't bother asking for a severance. I'll just claim you were creating a safety hazard with all this spilled water." The lobby went silent. Arthur looked down at his soaked boots. He had spent 12 years protecting this hotel's image, often working double shifts without pay to make sure everything was perfect for Julian's father. "I've given my life to this place, Julian," Arthur said, his voice low and steady. "And I'm giving you the afternoon off, permanently," Julian replied, turning his back on the old man. "Security, escort this cost-cutting opportunity to the service exit. I don't want him staining the front carpet." As Arthur was let out, he felt a strange mixture of humiliation and clarity. He sat on the sidewalk outside the hotel, the hot sun drying the soap on his trousers. He pulled out a phone that looked far too modern for a janitor, a custom device with only 2 numbers in the speed dial. He pressed the first one. "Marcus," Arthur said when his son answered. "The boy finally did it. He threw me out in front of everyone. He called me a relic." On the other end of the line, the sound of a high-powered boardroom meeting came to a sudden halt. "He did what? Dad, are you okay?"
"I'm fine, son, but I think it's time. He wants to talk about cutting costs. I think he needs to learn how much a sterling really costs." "Don't move, Dad," Marcus said, his voice turning into ice. "I'm calling Lily. She's been waiting for a reason to sue that family into the Stone Age. We're coming, and by tomorrow morning, Julian Vane won't even be able to afford a room in the hotel he thinks he owns." Arthur hung up and looked at the gold-lettered sign of the Gilded Palms. For 12 years he had cleaned the dirt. Now he was going to let his children take out the trash.
Before we get into the moment Julian Vane's world started to crumble, I want to see where the Sterling family supporters are watching from. Drop your city and state in the comments below. We love seeing how far these stories of justice travel. And if you believe that respect should be earned, not inherited, hit that subscribe button right now to join our community. Now, let's get back to the lobby where a storm is brewing. The lobby of the Gilded Palms was buzzing with its usual lunchtime energy. Julian Vane stood near the gold-leafed fountain, sipping a sparkling water and laughing with a group of investors. He felt lighter. Getting rid of Arthur Sterling, the human cost-cutting opportunity, felt like he was finally scrubbing the grease off his shiny new empire. He had no clue that the grease he just wiped away was actually the only thing keeping his gears turning. Exactly 4 hours after Arthur was escorted out through the service entrance, the silence of the hotel's valet stand was shattered. 4 pitch-black armored SUVs, the kind usually reserved for heads of state, pulled up to the curb with military precision. The lead vehicle bore a subtle silver crest on the door, a soaring eagle clutching a globe. It was the mark of Sterling Global Logistics. The valet hesitated, but before he could say a word, the doors swung open. Out stepped a man in a charcoal suit that cost more than a year of the hotel's property taxes. This was Marcus Sterling. Following him was a woman with eyes like blue ice, carrying a briefcase like it was a weapon. This was Lily Sterling, the most feared corporate litigator on the East Coast. They didn't check in. They didn't look at the art. They marched toward the elevators like they already owned the oxygen in the room. "Sir, sir," the head of security blurted out, stepping in their path. "You can't go up without an appointment. Who are you?" Marcus didn't even break his stride. He looked at the guard, a man who had worked with his father for years, and spoke with a voice that sounded like grinding tectonic plates. "My name is on the title of the shipping containers that bring your food, your furniture, and your fuel, Rick. And my sister's name is on the lawsuit that's about to shut this lobby down. Move." In the penthouse office, Julian was staring at a spreadsheet when his heavy oak doors were kicked open. He jumped, nearly knocking over his crystal decanter. "What is this? Security! Who authorized this intrusion?" Lily Sterling stepped forward, slamming a 300-page document onto his desk with a thud that echoed like a gunshot. "I did, along with the state Supreme Court. My name is Lily Sterling, and you have exactly 5 minutes to explain why you thought it was a good idea to assault my father this morning." Julian's face went from indignant to ghostly pale in 3 seconds. Your father? I haven't seen any Mr. Sterling today. I only fired a janitor," Marcus interrupted, leaning over the desk until he was inches from Julian's nose. "You fired Arthur Sterling, a man who has more integrity in his pinky finger than you have in your entire bloodline. You didn't just fire him, Julian. You humiliated him. You threw coffee on his shoes. You called him trash in front of his peers." Julian's voice shook. I didn't know. He never said anything. He just cleaned the floors. Why would a billionaire's father be a janitor?" "Because he wanted to be," Lily snapped. "He wanted to earn his way. He wanted to be a part of the world, not just a spectator. But you're just a spoiled kid playing with a toy you don't deserve. And unfortunately for you, we just bought the batteries." Julian's desk phone began to ring incessantly. He answered it with a trembling hand. It was the hotel's chief financial officer.
Julian, something is wrong. Our credit lines have been frozen. The suppliers for our restaurants have turned their trucks around. They're saying a global logistics hold has been placed on all deliveries to the Gilded Palms." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's my company, Julian, and as of 10 minutes ago, your hotel is officially out of steak, out of wine, and out of luck. My sister here just filed a lien against your property for the $300 million debt your father owed to the holding company we just acquired." Julian slumped into his chair, the air leaving his lungs. "What do you want?" "Retribution," Lily said, "and you're going to start by walking down to that lobby. My father is waiting, and you're going to apologize to him, not in a memo, not in an email. You're going to get on your knees on the same floor you made him scrub, and you're going to tell him you're sorry in front of everyone." Marcus grabbed Julian by the arm and pulled him out of his chair. "Let's go, CEO. It's time for your first real lesson in cost-cutting."
The elevator ride down to the lobby was the longest 30 seconds of Julian Vane's life. Between Marcus's towering presence and Lily's razor-sharp silence, the air felt thin. Julian looked at his reflection in the mirrored walls of the elevator. The man staring back looked small, his expensive suit now wrinkled with sweat. When the gold doors slid open, the lobby was frozen. Word had traveled fast. The staff had stopped working, the guests were whispering. And there, standing in the center of the white onyx floor, right where the coffee had been spilled, was Arthur Sterling. He was still wearing his damp, stained blue uniform. He looked like a man who had just finished a hard day's work, but his posture was that of a king. Marcus led Julian through the crowd like a prisoner. The silence was so heavy you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Marcus stopped 3 feet from his father and looked at Julian. "Well?" Marcus's voice echoed off the 40-foot ceilings. "The floor is waiting." Julian looked around. He saw the receptionist he had screamed at yesterday. He saw the security guards he had ordered to toss the trash. He saw the wealthy investors he had been trying to impress. Every eye in the room was on him. I apologize, Mr. Sterling," Julian stammered, his voice barely a whisper. "There was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Lily stepped forward, her voice cutting through the lobby like a blade. "A misunderstanding is a late shipment, Julian. What you did was an assault on a man's dignity. My father spent 12 years making this place look like a palace, and you treated him like the dirt on your shoe. You didn't just fire him, you tried to break him. Now say it so the people in the back can hear you." Julian's face was a deep, humiliated red. He looked at Arthur's boots, the ones he had splashed with dirty water. Slowly, painfully, the CEO of the Gilded Palms lowered himself. His knees hit the cold marble. "I am sorry, Arthur," Julian said, his voice cracking. "I was wrong. You weren't a cost to be cut. You were the heart of this hotel. Please, tell your children to stop the lawsuits. My family will lose everything." The lobby stayed silent. Everyone was waiting for Arthur's reaction. For a moment, it looked like the old man might reach up and help him up. Arthur had always been a man of grace. But then Arthur looked at his torn name tag, which Lily was now holding in her hand. "You didn't see a man when you looked at me, Julian. You saw a number. You saw outdated equipment. You thought that because I held a mop, I didn't have a voice. My children aren't doing this for revenge. They're doing it because you need to understand that the people who clean your floors and park your cars are the ones who actually build your empire." Arthur turned to Marcus and Lily. "I don't want his money. I don't want his hotel. But I do want him to know what it feels like to be invisible." Marcus nodded. He looked at Julian, who was still on his knees. "My father is a better man than I am, Julian. He's letting you keep your dignity, but I'm not letting you keep your job." Marcus pulled a document from his pocket.
As of 5 minutes ago, the board of directors, who are currently terrified of my sister's lawsuits, have voted to remove you as CEO. You're being replaced by someone who actually knows how to run a business with respect." Julian looked up, horrified. Who? Who could possibly replace me on such short notice? Marcus looked at the head of housekeeping, a woman named Maria, who had worked alongside Arthur for 10 years and had been treated just as poorly by Julian. "Maria," Marcus called out, "how would you like a promotion to general manager with a salary that matches the title?" The lobby erupted into applause. The staff began to cheer, some of them crying. Julian stood up, trying to slink away, but the crowd didn't part for him anymore. He was no longer the king of the gilded palms. He was just a man in a suit that didn't fit him anymore. Arthur walked over to Maria and shook her hand. Then he looked at his children. "Can we go home now? I'd like to change out of these wet clothes." "Of course, Dad," Lily said, putting her arm around him. As they walked toward the black SUVs, the guests and staff stood in a line, creating a path of honor for the janitor. They weren't clapping for the billionaire's father. They were clapping for Arthur.
Julian Vane retreated to his office, his face burning with a shame that no amount of money could wash away. He slammed the door, locking himself inside as the sounds of the staff celebrating in the lobby echoed through the vents. He scrambled to his desk, grabbing his private burner phone. He needed to call his father, the man who had built the Vane name. "Dad, you have to help me," Julian whispered into the phone, his hands shaking. "The Sterlings, they're here. They've frozen everything. They forced me to apologize to a janitor on my knees." There was a long, cold silence on the other end. When his father finally spoke, his voice wasn't filled with comfort. It was filled with disgust. "I heard, Julian. The news is already hitting the wires. Vane's CEO begs janitor for mercy. Do you have any idea what you've done to our stock price? You didn't just insult a man. You insulted the wrong man's father. I'm out, Julian. The board just stripped me of my chairman's seat to save themselves. You're on your own." The line went dead. Julian stared at the phone. He was 34 years old, and for the first time in his life, he had no one to bail him out. But the nightmare was only beginning. A soft knock at the door preceded Lily Sterling walking in, followed by 2 men in dark suits carrying federal badges. "What now?" Julian gasped, backing into the corner of his office. "I apologized. I lost the CEO spot. What more do you want?" Lily didn't smile. She pulled a blue folder from her briefcase. "The apology was for my father's heart, Julian. This," she tapped the folder, "is for the law. While you were busy cost-cutting the janitorial staff, you seem to have overlooked some very creative accounting in your tax filings. My firm did a deep dive into the hotel's books over the last 4 hours." One of the men with badges stepped forward. "Mr. Vane, I'm Agent Miller with the IRS. We have reason to believe you've been funneling cost savings from employee pensions into offshore accounts to fund your private jet lease. That's a federal crime." Julian's legs gave out. He slid down the wall, the same way Arthur had been on his knees earlier that morning. I can explain that. It was just temporary." "Tell it to the grand jury," said Lily coldly. "But before you go, there's one more thing. My brother Marcus doesn't just move freight, Julian. He buys land. He just closed the deal on the 3 blocks surrounding this hotel. Every parking lot, every delivery alley, and the very sidewalk you use to enter this building now belongs to Sterling Global." Marcus stepped into the room, looking down at the broken man on the floor. "I'm putting up a fence tomorrow morning, Julian. No one goes in or out of the Gilded Palms without my permission. And since your hotel is now a crime scene under investigation, I've decided to revoke your access. You have 10 minutes to pack your personal belongings. Anything left behind will be donated to the local homeless shelter in my father's name." As Julian was led out of the building in handcuffs, not through the front lobby, but through the same service entrance he had forced Arthur to use, the reality finally sunk in.
He had tried to save a few $1,000s by firing a relic, and in return, he had lost a $300 million empire and his freedom. Outside, the sun was setting over the Miami skyline. Arthur was sitting in the back of a luxury SUV, his old work shirt replaced by a soft cashmere sweater Lily had brought for him. He watched through the tinted glass as Julian was pushed into the back of a police cruiser. "Are you happy now, Dad?" Marcus asked, looking at his father through the rearview mirror. "I looked at the hotel one last time." He saw Maria, the new manager, standing at the entrance, greeting a guest with a genuine smile. He saw the security guards standing taller, no longer afraid of their own boss. "Happiness isn't seeing him fall, Marcus. It's seeing everyone else stand up. But I wouldn't mind seeing that fence you mentioned. Make sure it's a nice one." Marcus laughed, the tension finally breaking. "Only the best for you, Dad. Only the best."
1 year had passed since the day the invisible janitor shook the foundations of the city's elite. The Gilded Palms had undergone a massive transformation. It wasn't just the name, now officially rebranded as the Sterling Palms, but the energy of the building itself. The gold leaf was still there, but it felt warmer. The staff didn't walk with their heads down anymore. They walked with the confidence of people who were seen, heard, and respected. A black sedan pulled up to the front entrance. This time, it wasn't an armored SUV or a display of power. It was a simple, elegant car. The valet, a young man who had been hired under the new Dignity First initiative, opened the door with a genuine smile. Out stepped Arthur Sterling. He was 63 now, looking rested and healthy. He wore a sharp, well-tailored navy suit, but in his hand he carried something small and plastic. It was his old, cracked Arthur Lead Janitor name tag, the one Julian had thrown into the dirty water a year ago. As Arthur walked into the lobby, the atmosphere changed. It didn't go silent with fear, it erupted with warmth. Maria, now the general manager and part owner of the hotel, came rushing over to embrace him. "Welcome home, Arthur," she whispered. "The board is waiting for you in the ballroom." Arthur looked around the lobby. He saw a brass plaque near the fountain where he had once been humiliated. It read, "Dedicated to those who build this world with their hands. Your work is seen. Your dignity is sacred." "You've done a wonderful job, Maria," his eyes misting over. "The floors look perfect." "We learn from the best," she replied with a wink. Upstairs in the grand ballroom, Marcus and Lily were waiting. They weren't there for a legal battle or a corporate takeover today. They were there to celebrate the launch of the Arthur Sterling Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to providing scholarships and legal protection for blue-collar workers who had been mistreated by corporate systems. "Ready, Dad?" Lily asked, taking his arm. "The press is waiting. They want to hear from the man who turned a mop into a scepter. I just want to tell them that respect doesn't cost a dime, but losing it costs everything." While the champagne flowed and the city's new leadership toasted to a future of fair wages and human respect, 300 miles away, a very different scene was unfolding. In a state correctional facility, a man in a bright orange jumpsuit was pushing a heavy, rusted mop bucket down a long, gray concrete hallway. His hands, once manicured and soft, were now covered in blisters. His $5,000 suits were a memory, replaced by rough cotton and a serial number. Julian Vane stopped in front of a cell door and sighed. He looked at a smudge on the floor, a streak of dirt that wouldn't come out. "Hey, Vane!" a guard barked from the end of the hall. "Quit daydreaming. That floor isn't going to clean itself. You're behind schedule, and if you don't finish, you're losing your yard time." Julian looked at the mop. He looked at the gray water. He remembered the $100 bill he had tossed into the bucket a year ago. He remembered the look in Arthur Sterling's eyes, not a look of hate, but of pity. "Yes, sir," Julian muttered, bending his back to scrub the concrete. He finally knew his place. He was exactly where his character had led him.
Back at the hotel, Arthur stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean. He looked at his hands. The calluses were fading, but the strength remained. He had spent 12 years being invisible so his children could be seen, and in the end, they had made sure the whole world saw him for exactly who he was, a man of honor. As the sun set over Miami, Arthur Sterling finally retired, not because he was forced to, and not because he was a cost-cutting opportunity. He retired because his work was done. He hadn't just cleaned the floors, he had cleaned the soul of the building. The ghost of the Gilded Palms was finally at peace.